The Limitless podcast with Amita Shukla.
Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. Today we have a very special guest on, golf professional and two-time European Tour winner, Aaron Rai. Aaron has most recently won at the 2020 Scottish Open, with his first win on the European Tour coming in 2018 in the Honma Hong Kong Open. I really wanted to get an insight into how Aaron manages the psychological and mental aspects of the game, and gain an insight into his personal and professional life and how he manages the two. So today we really look at the mental challenges that he personally feels that he faces, along with what just in general sports people can face, the pressures along with the competitive failures and how these are managed. We talk about the importance of the relationship between golfer and caddy, and also why raising awareness into mental health is important for Aaron, and how he feels psychotherapy can be valuable in sport. So let's welcome Aaron Rai. Hello, Aaron. Thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Amita. I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to have you on my podcast today. So I think we should just jump straight in.
Yeah, sounds good.
So, I mean, a big congratulations on the year that you've had so far. It's been pretty exceptional. And I mean, throughout your golfing career and especially the success that you've had more recently, I'm wondering if you've actually noticed a shift in the level of pressure that you now face.
Yeah, this year has been amazing. It's probably been my best year to date. As you said, I think with good times, expectations change, and you're right. I think that's something that I've certainly had to try and adapt to, for sure. But I think it comes down to probably the reasons why I try and play golf, and trying to compare myself to just my own internal levels as opposed to expectations that come along with results or outside influences. So I think if I do that as much as possible, then I'll be able to manage things well.
And would you say that you now have greater expectations of yourself?
I don't think so, no. I try and be as self-aware as possible. And I think when I do notice shifts within me, whether those are positive or whether those are negative, I really try and rein myself in as much as possible and just remind myself, what are my standards? What do I hope to achieve for myself? And try not to go outside and rely upon my results, which then can determine my self-worth. I think if I continue to work hard, to do the best that I can do, and to try and be myself as much as possible, then my expectations will remain within, and hopefully they won't be influenced as much by the success that comes, or maybe the not so good times that are inevitable in any sports person's career.
Yeah, and you mentioned there the positive and the negative. So what are the greatest mental challenges that you face with the perhaps the negative results or the competitive failures that naturally come along with the game?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's one of the hardest things for most sports people to deal with, because I've seen myself play really well, and sometimes it's very hard to see when I'm not playing to the level that I know that I can. But as we touched on in the previous point, I think expectations that come through positive experience can take you off that balance, where you sometimes get too far ahead of yourself. But equally that works in a negative way, that if you get too down on yourself, if you get caught up in a cycle of negative thinking and getting caught up in the moment of struggling, then I think that's just as bad as getting too far ahead of yourself on the positive as well. So I think if you can bring everything and try and manage the highs and the lows, there's always going to be a slight difference. We're not robots, we're human beings. But I think if we can bring those highs and lows closer to one another, and I think stay on as much of an even keel as possible, then that certainly helps me manage the goods and manage the bads as well.
I mean, naturally, there's bound to be a mental strain that comes along with the pressure, the expectation, the attachment perhaps that you may have to achieving. So how do you manage that cycle? And how do you take care of your mental well-being?
That's another great question. It's something that I'm definitely working on. I think results in any sport, and certainly for me, growing up in golf, results have a massive impact on doors that open, on how success and failure is perceived, and that's hard to shake. And I think some of it is a good thing because it drives me to try and be as good as I can be. But a lot of that is quite unhealthy at the same time as well, because I think, as we spoke about before, when you start attaching yourself a little bit to success and failure, you leave yourself open to the ups and the downs that come along with it. So yeah, for me, managing it, I try and stay as even as possible. And with trying to manage my mental well-being, again, I think that's a very tricky concept, because I think to be the best that I can be, it's important that I give everything that I can to what I do.
Yeah.
And I think naturally when you're giving so much or thinking so much about something, it's very hard to create a balance, because in order to do that, a lot of the balance kind of moves into the background. So for me, coming home is probably the most important thing. And I think switching myself off from tournaments and having something in the back of my mind to prepare for is really important. And I link that with just coming home. And I live in the house that I've always lived at growing up. Everything is still the same. So for me, that just reminds me of familiarity, of my upbringing, of just things that really help to keep me very grounded, basically. So those periods, whether it's 1 week or 2 weeks between tournaments, I think are vital for me in the long term. And that probably helps just keep me balanced. And I think just it helps to create a simplicity within my life that I think is really important for me.
I mean, you mentioned there about perhaps the familiarity that comes with perhaps coming home, being around the people that you're used to being around through growing up. I mean, how important is that for you to keep that even keel and to perhaps hold your sense of self or perhaps your identity? How important do you feel that is for you, Aaron?
It's the most important thing. My family have known me since I was born. My friends I've known for a very long time, since my secondary school. As we said, my environment is the same as it always has been. And I think because I have such good relationships with my family and those friends, they see me for just being Aaron, the person, not the golfer. And I think that is so important. And what we touched on a couple of questions ago with that balance and how to kind of just have that switch off. For me, that's vital, that I think that I'm seen as much as possible for who I am as opposed to what I do. And I think that's where my environment is so important. So I'm very blessed to have an amazing family and but a few very, very close friends. I think that's so important for me. But I think that's important for anyone in any walk of life, really.
Yeah.
It's vital.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a great support system. So again, just off the back of that, I'm wondering how being away so much perhaps impacts you, if it does at all, and naturally it's bound to become influential because it is a part of your experience, and bound to kind of there's bound to be some relation with regards to your sense of self and identity. So I'm wondering how you manage that, or how aware you may be of that, and how you, again, with the two kind of being home, being away, how you may integrate the two together.
Yeah, being away is difficult. But it comes with the nature of traveling and playing professional golf. I think it's very important to be okay within yourself, and to be okay with spending a lot of time with yourself. Golf can be a very lonely sport sometimes, and I think the nature of travel in general, you're cut off to an extent from your family and your loved ones. With integrating it with the sense of self and coming back home, I don't see it as when I'm away, I'm a completely different person. My identity, I think, is still pretty similar. It's something I can improve on for sure, but I try not to see the two things as separate. Who I am when I'm away is not far off who I am when I'm home. So I think that helps to merge both of them.
So obviously, with being away so much, you spend a lot of time with your caddy, Jason Timmis. I'm wondering how important you feel that relationship is.
It's vital. As we touched on in the last question, being away from home, you're a little bit cut off from your friends and family, but your caddy is a mix of both. I think when you build a good relationship with them, they become a friend, they become a confidant, and you end up spending a lot more time with them than you do your family. So it's probably the most important relationship that you create from a working perspective, but also from a personal perspective, because they cover so many different areas. And yeah, with Jason, I'm very lucky to have him as part of my life and to work with him. And as we mentioned at the start, the last year has been very good for my golf career, but Jason has a lot to do with that as well, and the relationship that has been created there with both of us. So yeah, I'm very lucky.
Yeah, I hear that you have a good relationship with him. And I'm wondering how important that is for your mental and emotional well-being.
Very important. Very important. As I said, Jason is a bridge between, I guess, normality and friendship and borderline family in time, because you spend so much time with one another. I think what a lot of people don't realise, golf is obviously played over 4 days. A round takes between 4 and 5 hours. But you're actually at a golf course for probably 10 hours of those tournament days. And then from the Monday to the Wednesday before the tournament starts, again, you're probably there for an average of 8 hours. So you put that together. I can't count it at the top of my head, but that's a lot of hours in a week.
Yeah.
And when you're playing 30 tournaments a year, it's a huge amount of time to spend with someone. So, yeah, it's vital in terms of getting the best out of me as a golfer, because that working relationship is central to the player-caddy relationship. But almost as important as that is that personal relationship that you create. And just that bit of normality, really.
Yeah, so the support system whilst you're away is a really important factor for you. And you take care of yourself physically, and along with that support system that you have, how else do you take care of your mental and emotional well-being?
I meditate quite a lot.
Yeah.
and I make that a habit every evening and most mornings. I could probably improve a little bit with how much I do that in the mornings. But also I try and switch off a little bit as well through watching, whether that's a documentary, whether that's a movie, or whether that's Netflix, to just try and, I guess, switch off and move away from the tournament or the planning or the preparation. And I have a couple of really close friends on the tour as well, which is useful and great for just talking and just the normality aspect of it. Which of course helps with your mental health and your happiness. And I like to read a little bit as well. Mm-hmm. I go through periods where I sometimes read a lot. I can get through a book in the space of 2-3 weeks. And other periods where I read a little bit less, but over a period of time, it's something that has just helped me switch off a little bit and also learn. So that's an important part of my routines, really, when I'm away.
Yeah. So you like kind of, I suppose, nurturing and nourishing all the different parts of you, along with your passion for golf. I'm hearing that you also take care of all the other things that you enjoy as well, which is really, really great to hear. But how important is it for you to take time out?
It's vital. It's vital, and I think it's something, just talking personally, is something that I probably find hard, to just completely stop and to have a break where I don't do anything. But actually, over a long period of time, I'm beginning to see myself how important that is. So that's certainly an aspect that I can improve on. But I think taking those small regular breaks is something that I have always tried to do. But what I define as a break would still be practicing pretty much every day, but just trying to reduce the practice and keep the sessions a little bit lighter, maybe not as intense. And again, just relaxing a little bit more at the time that I'm not practicing. But as I touched on in the first part of that answer, I think sometimes a break where practice isn't involved, where there's not something that is on the back of my mind to practice for or prepare for, is actually very healthy for me, because it helps me just switch off and take that mental break and complete mental break. And I think, although under really bad circumstances for the whole world over the last year with the pandemic, that has created a forced break for me at times, which I've seen is very useful.
Yeah, I'm glad that that's really helped you, Aaron. And I know you're a keen supporter of mental health in sport. So why do you think that highlighting mental health in sport is important?
I think there are so many different facets to it. I think when we see sports women and sportsmen on the TV, we often see them as a product, and we see them for what they do as opposed to who they actually are. And I think the way that sport is put across in the media, it's more about what they do as a sports person, because to an extent we become products of the sport, and I understand why. And it's a great thing to promote that sport. But I think what can be forgotten in creating an image, in creating a product, is a person behind that sportswoman or that sportsman.
Yeah.
Because a person is the foundation of what you see on the TV. And I think as soon as that is neglected, and as soon as that is forgot, on top of the pressure and the environment and the success and failure that is put on sportsmen and women as a byproduct of the results, that person can easily get forgotten. And that's where you can create mental health issues. And they obviously translate into performance, but I think performance is a secondary motive here. It's about the person behind what you see through the camera. And I think raising awareness for that is a great thing, because I think we all face the same challenges. We all face similar challenges as humans, with dealing with whatever life throws at us. But I think in the nature of sports, sometimes it's more public than what a lot of people face, because we see them, and we watch them through screens. And I think if we can just remember that ultimately they are people, and that there's more to them than actually their success and their failures. And I think sport is an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. I think if we create the balance and if we create a little bit of awareness, then there's no harm that can come of that.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely a great ambassador for people in sport and for men as well. And through working together and having some insight into psychotherapy, what value do you think it has brought to your life, both personally and professionally? And what do you think it can bring to sport?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me personally, it's been invaluable. The understanding and the self-awareness that you create through conversations that we've had, I think just leads to being a more well-rounded person, and also dealing with the positives about us, which is great, but I think also having that understanding of the negatives and how we can work with that and how we can manage that and how we can probably become a little bit more whole in time as well from a personal perspective. I think it's very hard to separate the personal from the professional, because I think if you become a more aware person and you become more whole and integrated as a person, it seeps into your professional career and your performance anyway. I think there are some specifics that me and you have spoken about which do isolate the professionalism or the professional aspect. And one thing that really comes to mind when we have spoken in the past is probably the boundaries and almost the level of split that is maybe there between the personal side and the professional side, and how we can just try and integrate the two a little bit better. So I think on a professional point of view, that's helped me massively, and I think there's so much more that probably me and you could talk about in that sense, but there's so much room for you to help a number of people out there who do want to improve their careers as well as who they are as people. I think the possibilities are endless because our potential is endless. And I think you touch onto that. But yeah, I feel that it can add to anyone's life in any circumstance, whether they want to get the most out of themselves professionally or just become better people.
Yeah, I mean, there's been real insight from you today, and it's been great just having a moment to chat with you. I'm wondering if there's any final words from you, Aaron.
Yeah, I think the term psychotherapy is something that I feel people still often associate with the fact you have to have issues to see a therapist. And I think that is changing, but I think there is still an element of stigma that is attached to that. But I'd just like to make it clear that is not the case. I think if you just want to be a better version of yourself in a personal capacity, in a professional capacity, all therapy essentially does is provide a mirror to look within yourself, at all of the goods that you find there, or at all of the things that you can maybe improve on, or a few things that you can be aware of that just make you a more well-rounded person. You don't have to be going through a super hard time. It doesn't have to be what people would call a mental health problem. I think we're very quick to add labels in our society, but that doesn't have to be the case. I think it can help you when you're going through a tough time. It can help you massively. But you don't have to necessarily be going through a tough time to seek support and to seek help and to just want to be the best version of yourself. So I think it's something that everyone can benefit from every walk of life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those final words, and thank you for taking the time out today and for joining me. Have a great day, Aaron.
Thanks for having me on, Amita. You too.
The Limitless podcast with Amita Shukla.